The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
Welcome to the People's Business. I am Sanka. It's been more than a week, 9 days to be precise, since Hurricane Elsa hit Barbados, causing widespread damage, especially electricity outages. Since then, much has been done to restore the country and in some cases, even build back better. Yet there's still work to be done. People remain at temporary accommodations until their homes are repaired or rebuilt, and there are still thousands of people without electricity. Beyond that is the wider discussion of, is Barbados doing enough in its disaster preparedness? To talk about all this and provide the latest update, we have joined us tonight Ms. Kerry Hinds, the Director of Department of Emergency Management, Mr. Keithroy Halliday, the General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, Mr. Rohan Seale, the Director of Asset Management at the Barbados Light and Power Company, and of course Mr. Cummins, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Transport and Works and Water Resources. We start to discuss the people's business right after this break. Welcome back to the People's Business. I'm Sanka. Last Sunday while here we looked at the devastation, and government was in the initial stages of providing accommodation for the people displaced by Hurricane Elsa. We'll go first to Ms. Kerry Hinds from the DEM. And what are the numbers looking like now in terms of the people displaced and being accommodated by the state, and the latest figures on homes damaged?
Hi, good night, Mr. Price. Good night, panelists. Good night, Barbados. As we go into the second week after the hurricane would have hit, we have just over 500 persons, 500 households requiring alternate accommodations. They are being placed in temporary shelters, alternate accommodation which the state has sourced for them. There are some persons who are still with family and friends, and it is a work in progress. With respect to the numbers, based on the reports that we would have received, there are over 3,000 reports of some type of damage, and that would include not only damage to infrastructure, but fallen trees, poles, that type of thing. It is just over 1,700 reports of damage to roof structures that we are dealing with. Currently, we are out in the field along with a number of other agencies, including the Ministry of Housing, doing our damage assessment. And this damage assessment process will identify or verify the reports of damage we have, as well as identify any additional needs that the affected population may have. So various agencies such as the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of People Empowerment, Welfare, those type of agencies, along with our district emergency organizations, we've been out in the field just collecting that information that will indicate what needs are required.
Ms. Hinds, you said there were over 500 households How many people are we talking about here? Do you have any idea how many people we're talking about?
Essentially, just over probably around 2,000 persons. That based on the reports that we have. As I said, we are currently verifying that information because persons would have indicated that they will be staying by friends and family at least temporarily until the repairs or retrofit to their houses occur.
Okay. Just one more question before I move on to Mr. Halliday. Jamaica has been able to give us a figure as to the sort of damage, as to how much money it's cost that country in terms of damages. But yet we haven't heard anything from Barbados in terms of how much, what all this is going to cost or how much damage has been done. Do you have some idea as to what the cost so far?
As I said, persons are currently out in the field doing the damage assessment. And once that has been completed, or at least we've gotten a certain point with respect to that, then we'll be able to give you a figure. But right now you do the damage assessment and then a figure, you would estimate a figure of damage, and that should be coming at least sometime next week.
I said I only have one more question for you, but just let me stick this one in here. Why is it taking so long to do a damage assessment? I would think that 9 days after 9 days, that damage assessment would have been done by VEM. Why is it taking so long? Or it seems inordinately long to me. I thought that you would have enough people to hit the road and to be able to do this assessment.
Yes, as I said, persons are currently doing the assessment, and once it's finished, we will be able to give you the figures, but they're currently in the field.
All right. Mr. Halliday, what about the Barbados Water Authority? Are your systems fully up and running, or are we still waiting for electricity?
Good evening, Sanka. Good evening, everyone. Sanka, all of our facilities are online. Just about 4 facilities are still being operated by a generator. And once Light and Power reestablishes connection in those areas, we should be able to take them off of generators. So by and large, we are pleased with where we are in respect of getting our systems fully operational. We do have some pockets that we're working through, which would have been those typical areas that would suffer from our inability to produce as much water, whether it's in the north or in some instances, some areas in the eastern corridor, St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. John, etc. And those are the areas that are receiving all of our attention right now.
How seriously impacted was the BWA? Because your system you seem to have been able to get back up pretty fast. The only thing you didn't have is electricity. So why were you able to do this? How prepared were you?
We spent a lot of time preparing Sanka. Our preparation started as early as March 2021. Each year we've been able to move our preparation stage back by a month. I remember about 3 years ago we started that in earnest in May, June. We were able to bring it back to April, and this year we were able to bring it back to March. Our preparation would have included not just spot checks, a number of meetings which our ops group would have gone through, but we also did some desktop exercises just to make sure everyone knew what they would need to do. The greatest challenge we've had for some time is the ability to put all of the generators in place, and that's really just a funding requirement. So where we are in terms of generators now is at least twice the capacity that I would say about 2 years ago. And given the drive and the pledge for finances to do that, we should be able to deal with that certainly by the end of the year as well. So part of our success, if I can use that very guardedly, is really because we have been able to prepare very much in the way that we would have wanted to. The impact on BW as well was not as significant, simply because we battened down so to speak. We took the precautionary measure to close and to shut down all of our facilities. If we were to leave those facilities up and we were to have extreme flickering or variances on voltages or electricity, we knew that we would run the very real risk of damaging several of our facilities, and particularly our pumps or our pump sets. And therefore, having done that, by the time the system had passed and the all clear was given, and then we moved to bring our facilities online, we were able to do so with minimum damage. As a matter of fact, we had only lost one pump set, and based on investigations, it seemed really quite unrelated to Hurricane Elsa. The other measure we would have taken is to make sure that all of our resources, and particularly the electricians and everyone, were on standby and deployed accordingly, so that we could move very, very quickly when we were able to start back up our systems.
Well, let's talk numbers here with the Water Authority. You talk about generators. Local people, average people, are telling you that to run a generator, it's $160 worth of diesel for a day. It must be expensive to run generators for the Water Authority. So could you give me some idea of what it costs? Let's let the public know. What does it cost to operate these generators on diesel or gasoline?
If we were to look at the number of generators we have...
But how many do you have?
Prior to Hurricane Elsa, we would have had 25 generators in place. When Elsa was on its way, we procured for rental an additional 13. And that really was to guarantee that we had the maximum ability to produce as much water as we can for the country. The cost of that is one thing. The cost of maintaining the generators is a separate matter. And to get to your point, we would have engaged prior to that a contractor to make sure that once we needed to do the top-ups, that company, that entity or entities would immediately mobilize, and on a daily basis, at least twice a day, we will be refueling. So those generators required refueling every 8 hours, and in some instances, even shorter, depending on what it is. The generators that we're dealing with are not household generators. We're dealing with, at a minimum, 150 kVA, and that's on the very small side, and that will range all the way up to sometimes 1100 kV. So the generators are significant. They have to be able to work non-stop, and the fuel or diesel requirement, yes, is significant. So I cannot tell you the exact figure to date in terms of what we've been running, but I do know I've been approving a very costly bill for the last 10 days or so.
Give me a figure. A figure, sir. You're saying you've been approving?
A minimum of $40,000.
$40,000 a day?
No, that would be over a week.
Over the week.
But Sanka, don't hold me to that. Let me get that figure and get back to you on it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cummins, good evening to you again. The Ministry of Transport and Works, you've been out there on the roads. You've been having to clear the streets, clear the gutters. Just give us an update on what has been the major tasks that you've been encountering in cleaning up.
Good evening, Mr. Price. Good evening, fellow panelists. Good evening, Barbados. We have been involved in a number of things, and I'll break it out. We have a tree trimming unit, and that unit has been working very closely with the Barbados Light and Power, especially in areas where Light and Power needed to have access to ensure that power was restored. And more specifically, we work closely with them in trying to restore power to the pumping stations. Now, in an effort to clean the roadways as quickly as possible, those trees that we were unable to cut up, we would have pushed them to the side of the road, and in some instances, There are some fallen trees that we have not been able to remove from the roads because they're entangled in wires, and we've been advised by the Barbados Light and Power not to try to remove those trees until Light and Power advises us that it is safe to do so. As it relates to the drains, we've been removing a lot of debris along with the tree cuttings. We've been removing a lot of debris from the drains, as we have special crews. We have the drainage unit, but we also have some additional persons who are working with the National Ash Cleanup Campaign. So they have been, we have seconded them to assist with the cleaning of the drains while that regular cleaning continues, because it's important that we continue to ensure that all debris, especially that debris that can get into the drains and create problems, is removed. But over the last week, I would say our tree trimming unit, they have basically been working non-stop to try to get the trees off of the road, and most Barbadians would agree that some of the trees which have fallen are significant size. You know, it's really amazing to see the number of trees that have that came down, and there's still some roads which are impassable. One that readily comes to mind is that road directly behind the grandstand at the Garrison Savannah or the paddocks. There is still quite a few trees down there along with poles. So there's still a lot of work to be done. Fortunately, we have a very dedicated team, and they're up to the task.
Do you have enough equipment, enough manpower?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your follow-up question.
I was asking you about, do you have enough equipment or manpower? Do you need more equipment and more manpower to get this job done, to expedite this job?
We have enough equipment and manpower. We also have a standing memorandum of understanding with the certain private sector companies. So we have brought some of them in to assist us. So equipment-wise, yes. Manpower-wise, yes. But it takes time. I know the public would like to see it restored, you know, like yesterday. But safety is a very significant concern for us, and we always encourage our guys to be safe. As I said, we've been working a lot with Light and Power. We've been inundated with calls from homeowners who have trees near them, and they want the ministry to come in and cut the trees, but that's not the primary function of the ministry. Our tree trimming unit is really there to ensure that it remove those trees which are overhanging the roads that are not in the electrical wire escape, because as long as it's in the wire escape, we leave that to the expertise of the Barbados Light and Power. But we do have enough equipment, and we've had this MOU with the private sector for the last 2 years, and it has worked.
Great, thank you. And now we go on to Mr. Seale from the Barbados Light and Power. And could you give us some idea how the restoration has been going and how many people now remain without power? Mr. Seale? Mr. Seale, can you hear me? I think we're having a little problem there here, Mr. Seale. Let's take a break at this point, and we'll rejoin the People's Business with Mr. Seale when we return. Welcome back to the People's Business. I'm Sanka Price, and we're getting an update from Mr. Rohan Seale from the Barbados Light and Power, and he was about to tell us the restoration efforts, how many people remain without power, and which areas. Mr. Seale, can you hear me now?
Hi, good evening, Sanka. I can hear you loud and clear. Good evening, fellow panelists and also fellow Barbadians. We're happy to report that Barbados Light and Power continues its efforts with regard to electricity restoration for our customers. We have less than 2,000 customers that remain to be restored. We have individuals that we have restored within the St. Thomas area in Christie Village and also in St. George, Prerogative. We have restored individuals in St. Joseph.
Okay, so generally speaking, you've been able to whittle it down slowly but surely. Now, the question that most Barbadians are continue to ask is, why could this not have happened sooner? Mr. Seale, are you hearing me?
Sanka.
All right, let's move on. We're having a little problem there with Mr. Seale. As soon as he comes back on, I'll get a cue for that.
I can hear you, Sanka.
So, right, I was asking. Some Barbadians are saying that it's taken quite a bit of time for the Light and Power to be able to address restoring power across the island, and they're asking, why has it taken this long?
Right, so thank you for that question, Sanka. As you can appreciate, I think Mr. Cummins enumerated it very well in terms of some of the challenges with regard to access, with regard to trees as well, and we have been working collaboratively with MTW. I think that the progress we have made has been significant. We are down to 2,000 customers that we have left to be restored. And as alluded to earlier, I was mentioning some of the areas that we have restored for today. In St. Thomas, for example, Christie Village. In St. George, we completed Prerogative. In St. Joseph, Tent Bay, Round Rock, and Bathsheba. And also in St. Lucie, North Cumberland. We did a complex job in the city that we completed today in Fontabelle, and also in Reed Street, and also customers in Pelican and Redmond Village. And certainly with regard to the number of areas that we have restored so far, Light and Power of the view that we have progressed in terms of where we expect it to be at this stage. And certainly just after 1 week and having just 2,000 customers to restore, we are of the view that that is significant progress given the fact that we were impacted by a Category 1 hurricane. And certainly we are satisfied with the progress that we have made, and we continue to work with the relevant agencies to ensure that power is restored to all of our customers, and we expect to have that by the end of this week. And certainly we would then be focusing mainly on customer outages or restoration of service wire and so on to houses.
What is the major difficulty you're facing right now, particularly for those 2,000 customers? Are there clusters in particular areas? Like in St. Lucie?
Right, so those are...
yes, go ahead.
Right, those customers are, as you mentioned, they're clusters, they're scattered across the island, not large groups of customers. We mentioned some of those customers are impacted by what we call complex jobs. In other words, there are multiple poles, and we have worked very well with our contractors to have those poles planted. So we have planned the switching arrangements for those jobs to ensure that they are executed safely. Quite a bit of planning goes into the restoration of the network. So that comes to part of the time. And as mentioned by my colleague, Ms. Cummins, quite a few of the areas still needing to be cleared of trees and debris. So things like access issues would have prevented some of our progress. But as mentioned, we have made good progress in terms of the majority of our restoration. And as we did indicate very early in the game, that restoring that last 5% of our customers takes a bit of time, but we are progressing well in that regard.
Mm-hmm. President of the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados, Edwin O'Neill, has been very vocal in his concern about the length of time it has taken for some people's electricity to be restored by the company, by the BL&P. Now he's bearing down. Now he says, bearing in mind that our company is downsizing in recent years, there must be people no longer employed by the company, but who have the skill sets required to effectively do the job, and that these people could have been called instead of waiting for crews from Donker. We have a clip from him on this. Just give a listen, and I'd like a response from you.
My concern is very simple. If storm passes, it impacts, we have air crisis. There are persons in Barbados outside of light and power in Mirror. Could they not have been mobilized as early as this Saturday, immediately following, rather than waiting a week for the assistance to come from overseas? And I am aware of the Kerry situation and the agreements between the various national electric companies. In spite of those agreements, my question remains: what are these Dominican linesmen coming in to do? What skills are they bringing that do not exist in Barbados outside of Emira? And if the answer is that they're not bringing anything additional, then why has the public of Barbados been inconvenienced and made to suffer for a week, when presumably there was no need for it to remain as long as it has?
Mr. Seale, you heard the extract.
Yes, I did, and yes, and thank for that, and we appreciate some of the expressions there. But first of all, let me state to both to the panel, I think personally appreciate that, and also to the part of Barbados, that the work that we at Barbados Light Power engage in, we deal with a very dangerous product, and we're not able to just take any man off of the street to assist us in particular with restoration work. We have done with regard to some of our retired employees and also some of the contractors as well that are skilled. We engage them in work that we know it is safe for them to perform. When it comes to restoration work with safety authority, first of all, we have to use someone that has the necessary training and the skill set to be able to perform that work safely. And that is the reason why within the Kerry group of utilities, we tend to on the strength of linemen, various utilities, because these are skilled journeymen, we call them, and also they are individuals who have been doing this work on a regular, routine basis. So we're not able to call on individuals who would have left this particular work for a long period of time if you want to ensure that that individual remains safe and that we continue to execute on our mandate in a safe manner. So that's the reason why primarily we draw on other linemen from other jurisdictions. And I don't think that you have to get very technical to help persons to appreciate that in this case we're dealing with voltages above 6,000 volts, above 11,000 volts, above 24,000 volts in some instances. So that requires a skill set that requires alignment in many instances, where individuals can provide support we tend to use that mainly as back office support or even to help us safety and also with planning and on. So we do on individuals. I hope that answers that for you.
All right. Mr. O'Neill also questioned if the Light and Power has adequate staff and maintenance programs. In addition, he wants a probe into what many see an inordinate delay in service restoration. I'll just give you his last clip.
Was there a program of inspection and maintenance? How many of those poles showed up in our maintenance and inspection examination? However you take it. So 200 poles come down, whether you got it by parish or by grid or whatever other technological devices they use, how many of those poles were anticipated to come down if there was a system of inspection and of maintenance? And if and does Light and Power have enough linesmen or crewmen, have enough staff to ensure that there's a year-round maintenance so that Barbados don't have to go through this again? I repeat, given where we find ourselves, given how vital power is to the economy of this country, I am calling for a commission of inquiry to inquire into the circumstances of how we have ended up in this state.
Mr. Seale, you heard the question. He's calling for a commission of inquiry. Your response.
So to indicate that Barbados Light and Power, first of all, we have over 400 staff, so we are adequate resource for the times in which we are as a company. And certainly we want to help persons to appreciate that our linemen have been multi-skilled and also multitask. So what we have over 17 restoration crews, and we have many other individuals, as we mentioned, in the back office doing planning and also supporting those particular crews. With regard to maintenance, we want to indicate that we have a regular and rigid maintenance regime for the over 72,000 poles that we have on our network, in fact 72,200. So the estimate of 200 poles coming down or being damaged, that's really an estimate that has come from the app that we have. But what we found, persons have been putting very valuable information into the ECI Restore app. But what we found from some of our investigations by our trained inspectors, when they actually visit those particular poles or those reports, we found that in terms of the actual numbers is more around 1/3 of a lot of the reports that we have been getting with regard to damage. So the failure rate for our poles, even if we use that 200, really less than 0.03% of our poles, which is a very good percentage. And that also lines up with some of the models that we've done for storm preparation. In other words, along with our insurers, what we've done in the past is actually model the impact of either Category 1 or Category 2 storm, and we assess the impact that we believe in terms of the damage to our poles, and it pretty much lines up with what we have been seeing in the field. And just to mention, a lot of those poles have been felled by trees as opposed to falling over because they are rotten or because of some other issue. So we have to take those factors into account. And we are of the view that we know we have a very rigid maintenance regime, even also with regard to tree trimming. And as I think that persons can fully appreciate that Barbados is a well-treed country. Many trees grow in close proximity to our trees and our lines. And even we have a very rigorous vegetation management program whereby we cut back and trim some of those trees according to the trim cycle that we have. Some of those trees still fell over and impacted our poles in a negative way.
All right, thank you very much.
20 years, but in 20 days, and when you come and say, whip, whip,
Welcome back to the People's Business. I'm Sanka Price, and we got an update from the Barbados Water Authority, the Ministry of Transport and Works and Water Resources, as well as the Barbados Water Authority, and of course the Department of Emergency Management. We'll go back to the Barbados Water Authority because there was a question I wanted to find out before I went on, and that was what was the percentage of the system that is backed up by generators at this point?
Thank you, Sanka. 10%. We have 10% that are currently on generators. That's roughly 40, which does not necessarily create to 20 to 10% of our production capacity. In fact, that production capacity will be quite small in comparison to our overall production, in comparison to the overall facilities that we have. As well, when we look at the amount of generators that we actually have permanently installed, we are at about 50% capacity. So anytime there is an emergency event or an approaching storm, through a similar MOU that we have in place, we will procure a number of rentals, and that would take us up roughly to about 80%, sometimes more. So we have been operating on the installation, or rather we've been working on a program to install a number of permanent generators over the years. We have an additional number of generators we're looking to procure right now, and that's an arrangement that's currently in place already or progressing, and that will ensure that we have all of the generators we need in place on the potable water side. On the wastewater side, in the wastewater division, all of our systems, all of our lift stations or treatment plants, they all have standby generators already in place.
What about your effort to use renewable energy? Would that not help to be more resilient?
Yes, we have been actively engaging in a number of our installations. I think we were one of the first government institutions that would have done that as far back as maybe 2013 or 14. We would have done that with our Carlton system. We have since done that with Lakes Folly, Bowmanston, the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant. We're actively doing one at the Bell, and we're enhancing some of those facilities with additional improvements and additions. This is something that we take very, very seriously, to the extent that in terms of making sure that our resiliency is increased, we have looked at RE as a key alternative, and for a number of reasons. It's not just about resiliency, but also, and not just about having an alternative in place, but also about managing that cost, if we were to be very real. So that is something that's still on the cards. That's something that's still happening at the moment. At Bell right now, we are getting ready to break ground with a 600 megawatt facility. We have another facility about to be installed at Hampton as well. These are all funded by various international agencies, and this will be an ongoing effort. So we take that is a part of our consideration. That's a part of our mitigation plan as well.
So when these two come on stream, what percentage of the Water Authority's generation power will be by alternative energy, renewable energy?
It would still be less than 10%, probably about 6 or 7%. Our electricity use is significant. And I think it's no secret that we are Barbados' Light and Power largest single-owned customer. And therefore, that dependence on the grid has been of concern for us for some years. And certainly over the last several years, we've been tackling it aggressively. But like everything else, it takes funding, it takes planning, and you have to find a balance. And we are now part of a number of companies, state-owned enterprises, that's looking and working actively in conjunction with Light and Power through the Ministry of Finance. We're looking at ways in which we can address that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Halliday. And just letting the public know that you can give us a call, 228-5562, 228-5562, and we'd love to hear from you. We go on now to Ms. Kerry Hinds and Mr. Mark Cummins, and if both of you can tell us about the rebuilding homes and how that is going. Maybe let's start, Ms. Hinds.
Thanks for the question. With respect to the rebuilding of retrofitting and rebuilding of homes, the Ministry of Housing, they will take the lead on that. They have had a number of meetings and they're out in the field looking at the various households that will require some works.
You said earlier that there were over 1,700 reports of roof damage. Now, realistically, do you have the skilled people and the materials coming on fast enough to be able to deal with this situation in the short term?
Of those, as I indicated, persons would have reported damage. However, there are some persons who may have opted to retrofit based on their own means. And there are some that will utilize their insurance to cover whatever costs. Now, there are others who will require that public assistance. Based on what we see thus far, the materials are here in Barbados that can possibly cover the rebuilds.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned insurance, and in fact that was something that came up last week when we were discussing this whole issue. The fact that quite a few of these people did not have insurance. And I remember you making the point that we should look at incentivizing Barbadians to get home insurance. But before we go to that aspect, what I'm wondering is where people who have lost their roofs or have their houses damaged and they have insurance, what has been the response from the DEM to those people in particular, vis-a-vis others who don't have insurance at all? In other words, have you gone out to try to give these people who have insurance the basic assistance, or you've just left them?
What we do, as I said, we would have taken the reports, and at this point in time, regardless if you have insurance or not, the damage assessors are on the ground looking at that damage. The persons would have decided to go to their insurance company if they have the particular insurance or not. But regardless if you have insurance or you don't, we will assess what damage is there because it is a report. We have to verify all the reports we see. So the damage assessment process, which is being led by the Barbados Statistical Services and assisted by a number of other government agencies and private sector, they will look at all reports and they will then look to see what was the nature of the damage, to verify the nature of the damage, and we also have persons in the field who will look to quantify.
We have a call on the line. Caller, good evening. Go right ahead with your question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, I call you all talk about insurance and everything people have, but something I do not understand. You pay insurance and then something happens. First, you do not get back your full coverage of everything. I want to tell you, well, you know, hurricane disaster did nothing there. You have the control over people shouldn't complain. But one of the main things I want to know, how when something happens, we step up and help everybody, and no one, under no circumstance, let the Barbados, all they do, help us, so nobody then decide to come forward and say, well, let me chip in, at least in a bottle of water. But one thing I don't understand, you always reach out and help who outside, but when it's returned, nobody doing. and decide to help, but you say always want from me first, and you should always help one first. But people always have something to stand up and who here need just as much or more. So that's just my contribution to the program to hear what is what.
Well, sir, I don't know if Ms. Hinds would want to deal with this, but and Mr. Cummins, but if the government has been doing a number of things in terms of relief, I don't know if Ms. Hinds and Mr. Cummins would want to speak about the relief efforts at this point. Ms. Hinds?
With respect to the, thanks for the question. With respect to the various relief efforts, as persons would know, the government has indicated that their account has been opened to receive any monetary donations. With respect to non-monetary donations, the Ministry of Labor, they have been designated as the point to receive and distribute donations. Usually in times like this, and this one is no different, there are persons locally as well as in the international arena, in wider diaspora, that indicate their willingness to send supplies to support the rebuilding or the relief efforts. And that is no different this time.
Mm-hmm. And I can add there that at CBC, you know, we had a drive and drop, drive and drop initiative, and several boxes of items were received. I just have to get a tally from our marketing specialist as just how much was received. But so initiatives have been taken locally. So I don't think it's really accurate to say that we are not helping our own. We certainly are. Anyway, let's take another call. You're on the air. Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead with your question.
Yeah, I want to know why it is the people that have the solar system that are grid tight, you know, obviously when the current go off or down, then the whole grid, the system start working also. Now there's a hybrid system that normally switches on its own, which it can prevent the linesmen from being executed, from shooted, and also supply the house with electricity. I just want to know from the far away is that they don't want to allow the hybrids to run. And when you spend all that money to put on your roof, then you still don't get electricity even in downtime. So I just want to know why the hybrids are not passed.
Mr. Seale, did you hear the question? Mr. Seale. All right, let's take a commercial break while we work out our song again with Mr. Seale, and we'll be right back. Yeah. Welcome back to the People's Business. I'm Sanka Price, and with me is Ms. Kerry Hinds from the DEM, Mr. Mark Cummins from the Ministry of Transport and Works, Mr. Halliday from the Barbados Water Authority, and Mr. Rohan Seale from the Barbados Light and Power. And the last question was really directed to the Barbados Light and Power, and it was talking about renewable energy and the fact that although you have the solar panels, because the electricity goes to the grid, when the grid goes down, then it's no help, and there should be a different system in place. At least that was a suggestion. Your response, sir.
Right, so thanks to the caller for that. And just to indicate that we do, Barbados Light and Power does the use of renewable energy, but we have to bear in mind that because PV systems represent a source of what we call that goes back to the grid, one of the safety features of PV system is that once there's no from the grid, that those from the grid. That's a safety feature. Opportunity for householders to have those PV systems remain connected to facilitate that. It would also have to install what we call batteries. We have to be very careful in that, because the current legislation only allows renewable energy to be sold back to the grid. Those battery systems have to be so configured in a way that it is only from a renewable source. In other words, during the day, the PV system places some of that power into the battery. If the grid goes down, the battery maintains the voltage so that that system can remain to the grid and then feed some of that power back to the house. Now, there were some configurations of what we call energy management systems. They have what we call a generator, like a diesel generator, connected to some of those systems, and that's not allowed. In other words, the traditional generator is not allowed to feed back onto the grid. So only systems that are discouraged, but renewable sources of power certainly are encouraged and are allowed to feed back onto the grid, whilst allowing those PV systems to continue to work. I hope I've not been too technical. I've tried to explain it as simply as I can, but persons will need a battery in order to be able to continue to feed those PV systems onto the grid, and also to feed themselves as well.
All right, we have another caller on the line. Caller, can you go ahead with your question?
Good evening. I'm calling about a pool I have reported since 2019 in the first lockdown from Barbados Light and Power. I never got any reply for about a year or anything. I keep calling religiously, and then when I call, I got a letter stating last year, November, that I have to give them 15 weeks before they can actually deal with the pool. Okay, so 15 weeks passed. No one came. I called back on numerous occasions, and then somebody just came and looked at the pole. The back of the pole is actually rotten and out of the ground. The pole is very rotten all the way going up. I don't know how soon Light and Power could deal with it, but this is going 2 years and some now that the pole is actually, the back is coming out of the ground. And the whole pole is actually rotten. I even stopped 2 people from Light and Power the other day that came to the gap, assessing the area, and they said they would try as soon as possible to get it that way. But I never hear about any reply call. Person said they were going to reply to me. They didn't reply. When they called more than once, everybody just saying my name, contact number, and not replying. I don't know if y'all could give me some clarity or how long do you guys need to take to change a pole?
Mr. Seale, how long does it take to change a pole?
So thanks for that. First of all, I think the caller did mention that someone did visit the pole. So we do send someone technical to have a look at our pole out there, and we make a determination. Well, customers very some are disconcerted when they see a rotten pole, but we do make an assessment as to whether some form of remediation, first of all, can occur with regard to that pole, or whether in fact it needs to be removed or replaced. And we also do proactive testing of our poles to check their integrity. In addition to the public calls that we receive, we also do perform our inspections to check the integrity of a pole. Now, once we have determined that a pole needs replacement, we then pass that pole to a contractor to have the pole removed and also planted. And that process takes a matter of weeks once we perhaps around 2 weeks in order to have that entire process completed. Once we make a determination or we deem that the pole is necessary to be replaced. Poles that pose a safety hazard we of course action those very as a priority immediately. But certainly we are the ones that make the assessments in terms of whether a pole needs to be replaced or not. We appreciate those customer calls, and the customer can call me after the program, and I'll investigate specifically her specific concern to ensure that that's addressed. Thank you.
You would be aware, Mr. Seale, that one of the major concerns that Barbadians have, especially now, they're seeing these pile of wires and on the poles, and they've been, certainly we got a couple of calls here when your workmen said that a lot of the wires belong to the telecoms companies, the cable and wireless, you know, the telephone company. What is really being done about that? Is there a timeline as to when these wires will be removed, so take some of the weight off of the poles?
Right, so that's an ongoing effort, Sanka, whereby we work collaboratively with all of the telecom companies, because there are a number of third-party attachers, as you could appreciate. And as we mentioned, I think I mentioned earlier that there are instances whereby we plant new poles, we transfer our assets, and then we have the challenge of either the existing pole, which is obviously a rotten pole. It still has some of those wires attached to it, and that poses a challenge during an event as we had a hurricane, whereby those poles may then fall or topple over. It doesn't occur every instance, but we also have instances where if a tree falls and also impacts on those telecom, and then it also pushes against our pole, that also creates a challenge for us.
Okay. Mr. Cummins, we were talking earlier about the trees, the amount of trees still to be removed, the amount of trees that you have already removed, and you've done this in conjunction, of course, with the Light and Power. But what responsibility do Barbadians have in this whole process in terms of trees on their property? Do they have any responsibility in this at all?
Thanks for the question, Sanka, and it's a very, very important one. Barbadians have a major responsibility because the road reserve, which is that area between the edge of the road, and in some instances it is 13 feet from the center of the road, in some instances it's 17 feet, in some instances it's 21. But that area referred to as the road reserve, no one is allowed to plant anything within the road reserve. Unfortunately, we have a number of persons who have planted trees and somehow don't seem to be cognizant of the fact that trees grow and grow very, very rapidly. So these trees then grow and become entangled in the wirescape, creating challenges. Well, we are seeing the result of that now, because in my experience, a lot of the fallen trees that I have seen also damage the wirescape, whether that be Light and Power or the telecoms. And I must support Rohan. A number of those trees in impacting the wirescape then also created challenges for the poles. So I think going forward, my old department, town planning, is going to have to be a lot more vigilant and ensure that persons do not plant any sort of vegetation in the road reserve which has the potential to grow into the wirescape. Or persons should also not plant trees like directly behind the road reserve, or if you do plant it directly behind the road reserve, then you have to exercise some element of control to ensure that you trim it on a regular basis, and so it does not impact the wirescape. And I think, notwithstanding the fact that this is a bad experience, I think there are a lot of positive takeaways that we can gather from this. And one would be, I'm not saying don't plant trees. Trees are beautiful. Trees are important, and we need the trees, but we need to control them. Just before I finish, Sanka, earlier you had made reference to building back better when you were speaking with Kerry and the housing program. While I'm not directly involved with that aspect, what I can say to you is from the ministry's end, where we have responsibility for the Barbados Building Standards Authority. The Director of Building Standards, he has worked with the Public Affairs Department to produce 3 or 4 4-minute videos focusing on the correct things to do at the foundation stage in building the superstructure and also the roof. He has also produced some specimens in terms of how to tie the roof and all of the other important things to ensure that the roof can withstand winds of certain speeds. And this is definitely something that the ministry will be rolling out along with the Ministry of Housing, because it makes no sense for us to be spending large sums of money building back and we don't build back something that is significantly more resilient than what was there before. I saw a roof not too far from where I reside, and when I stopped and took a closer look at it, instead of it appears that the 2x4 was cut and the trusses were 2x2, and then the roof was nailed to that. Now that was taken and blown from one building, probably about 80 to 100 feet in a westerly direction. I think we must have a proper inspection system at the various stages, maybe the foundation stage, the superstructure, and certainly at the roof, to ensure that we are doing the right thing. And I know we have very skilled artisans in Barbados. We also have the excellent SJPI. It's just a matter of coordination, whereby you can have a proper inspection system, and this is all part of the building code. I think we have heard the engineers speak, we have heard the architects, we have heard the builders, the contractors. It is time for us to have we do have a building code. It's time for us to have legislation that supports that building code, so we can have a quality standard in the building industry in Barbados. And let's use Elsa as a wake-up call.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins. We take a commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Mr. Cummins, we have on the screen here something from Facebook. It says, it's just gone off the screen, but it was basically saying that when the cleaners clean, they want to, okay, there it goes again. Mark, when the cleaners clean the drains, make sure they have the bags to put the stuff in. Barbie's Hill is a perfect example. Could you respond to that, please?
Yes, I can respond to that, and thanks for the question. Suffice it to say, we have purchased in excess of 40,000 bikes since the ashfall, and we continue to purchase those bikes. And sometimes our cleaning crews, because of the efficient manner in which they work, they work a lot faster than we have bikes. We've also had donations of bikes from some of the private sector entities, but we have been purchasing a significant amount of bikes, especially those white Crocus bikes, to bike the stuff, which is then taken to the landfill or off the SBRC. So we are aware that we need to to get the, when the material is cleaned up, we need to bag it and get it off the road because we don't want it to wash back into the drains. And also let me use this opportunity to remind homeowners, especially those persons who have the lawn cuttings and tree cuttings. And then sometimes we engage persons who have blowers and they use the blower to blow it off the property, and invariably it ends up in a drain. What we need to do is to bag this stuff and then have it taken to the SBRC or to the landfill, or some people are skilled enough to use it for the compost. But I do thank the caller for the question.
Another question I have here, I certainly got on my phone, is to ensure that you get it you manage to take away the bags in a timely manner. Apparently, sometimes they stay there too long, and it's been a complaint too. We go to the next caller on the line. Go right ahead, caller.
Hello, good.
Good evening.
Yeah, what I want to find out, the Light & Power seem to take it upon themselves to erect poles on people's premises without even asking permission. I would like to hear the representative from the Light & Power address that situation.
Mr. Seale, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did, and thanks for the question. In response to that, I just want to signal that the utility does not have eminent domain. In Barbados, even though we have limited real estate, every pole position, basically we have to ask our customers for permission to plant poles, and our poles normally are installed on the boundary position. In other words, that boundary marker between various lots. But anytime we're doing a major construction or planting poles, right-of-ways, wherever they are, we normally seek permission from our customers, and it's something that's signed off on. So that would be a strange one where we were not allowed to just plant poles anywhere on person's property.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seale. As I have you here, let's talk about what we can do better, be better prepared to do next time. What is the most important lesson that the Light & Power has learned from this situation, and how do you plan to improve your response?
Right, so as we mentioned, we did have a significant amount of damage from trees, fallen trees, and even though we have an extensive vegetation management program, we trim approximately 200 trees a month. And I think as fellow panelists, Mr. Cummins indicated, there is a challenge with regard to trees, and on an annual basis, Barbados Power encourages our customers do not plant trees near power lines. And I see enumerated very well that there is a challenge persons plant trees near power lines or even in the reserve, and that, as he mentioned, that affects the treescape, and it comes in and impacts our infrastructure. We want to encourage persons to avoid that. In fact, we have situations where our crews have actually been chased away by customers from trimming trees, and then subsequent to that, they reached out to some of our senior management, including our managing director, to have those trees subsequently trimmed. So we recognize that it is a challenge there. We want our customers to continue to work cooperatively with us. Do not plant trees near power lines if you want to have your power not impacted or restored quickly. We also want to have engagement with the telecoms providers to ensure their facilities meet the standards for our construction, as we have indicated in our agreements. And we also, as I mentioned, we want customers' responsibility for their trees. I think I want to acknowledge that I think that in Barbados we've become accustomed to a particular way of life, and when that's interrupted, the challenge goes out to the government, it goes out to the utilities. We will play our part, but we want to encourage fellow Barbadians to take some measure of responsibility for their own actions and ensure that the practices that they engage in would ensure that they themselves and also fellow Barbadians are not impacted. So we know that we have high expectations, but certainly we want to ensure that we all work collaboratively together ensure that we have a rapid restoration following the events that occurred.
This is a follow-up question. When will the light employer be placing more of their services on the ground?
But again, thanks for that, Sanka. That's an ongoing effort. We have a significant amount of our transmission on the ground. In fact, we are working on...
Sort of cross, you may say a significant amount. What percentage?
But the percentage of our on the ground network, we have only around, I want to say about 8 circuits or so that are overhead that just need to be placed on the ground. Percentage-wise, when we calculated, it was around 65% or so, just over 65% because of length. And when we check that, but we are able to bring back all of our transmission very rapidly after an event like this. The major challenge that we face with regard to our distribution lines, which is very extensive. And as we mentioned, we do have plans to continue to grow our infrastructure. Our substations are already resilient. The area of resilience that we are focusing on now is actually placing some of those distribution lines on the ground. And we have the opportunity to do that given the recent, for example, the road works that occurred along Highway 1 on the West Coast, and there's work planned for Highway 7 as well. We do have plans in place to underground infrastructure in those areas in the very near future. And that's an ongoing process because of the significant investment. And we continue to work collaboratively with government and also the other agencies to ensure that those facilities are placed on the ground.
You said it would be a significant investment. Can you give an idea how much it's going to cost? And who pays for it?
Well, at the end of the investment is made by the utility, but at the end of the day, because of our rate structure, the customer does end up paying for it because we use the cost of service model here. For example, just to give you an estimate, and don't hold me to these figures, but initial estimates, for example, along Highway 1 to underground that infrastructure is in excess of $15 million, and some projections for Highway 7 is around $17 million, and those are initial costs. So while undergrounding significantly allows the network to be more reliable, those costs are around 10 to 14 times the overhead network. So it is a matter of who's willing to pay for that investment to guarantee increased reliability given the particular event and the impact of that particular event. It's a significant cost, and yeah.
So are you suggesting or implying that we could be looking at the light and power going to the FTC for a rate increase to be able to do this?
We do go to the FTC, Renewable as an organization, as a company, and we do our rates as necessary. In this, we will make the determination. So whether if it is that we do need to go underground, which part of our eventual strategy, the necessity to go to the FTC will obviously emerge from that.
All right. I think we have a caller on the line. Caller, can you go ahead with your question, please?
Hello.
Just go right ahead.
Hello, good night.
Good night.
I have a question. Now, there's a pole in front of my house, and there's a wire, a small wire hanging. My house, half of my house have the electricity, the other half doesn't have it. We had an electrician come in. The electrician said something about the phase. My son sent a photograph into the company and a message, and we haven't heard anything. So I would like to know if someone will come so that I can have electricity, because I'm a senior person and I have to got wires running along my floor to get other utility equipment working in my house. So please.
All right, Mr. Seale, can you answer that one? And we try to get the producer, if the person's still on the line, to leave a number as well. But Mr. Seale, could you respond to that, please?
Yes, right. I didn't catch all of it, but certainly I think I heard that there is a challenge there where she mentioned she wants to have her supply back because of the circumstance, and we do address those. I think I just want to mention the fact that we do have some customers out there that are what we call our critical life support and so on, and we do have an understanding of exactly where those customers are. They have an issue, we respond, whether it is a storm or not. So whenever there is a safety issue or some issue impacting our customers that is either of a safety nature or impacts their health, certainly we address those individuals very, very rapidly. So if that individual has their contact, leave their contact information with you, we will address that particular concern.
All right, thank you,
all
Mr.
of the
Seale.
question, but that was the gist of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seale. Go to Ms. Kerry Hinds. What would you like to see people doing on an individual basis that would result in significant improvement in our preparedness here in Barbados for disasters in general, hurricanes and disasters in general?
I think it is important that persons get the necessary information, listen to the various tips that we have out there, garner as much information as possible about the hazards that may affect them, and then they have their disaster management plans in place. It is also very important that they monitor the various channels as it relates to any public awareness materials that the Department of Emergency Management or the other agencies may place in the public domain. This particular system has also reinforced the need for persons to ensure that they have the adequate insurance and that they maintain their homes. So it is really for persons to reflect on what has happened as a result of this particular hazard and the impact of this hazard, and see where they can improve on their own personal preparedness, their family preparedness, and their community preparedness.
Very quickly before we go to a commercial break, what is your response to the fact that so many people had meat products in their freezer, and one of the messages that the DEM has been saying for years is that they shouldn't do this? Does that suggest that people are clearly not understanding what you're saying, or have ignored what you're saying, or they've just done what they want to do?
Usually our messages for the hurricane season is that persons stock up on non-perishable food items, and that is very important, and we will continue to place those messages in the public domain, and we encourage persons to heed those messages so as to avoid instances as what would have occurred last week.
We'll take a commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I'd like to get from Mr. Halliday, what is the biggest lesson that the Water Authority has learned from this entire exercise? And let's wrap up as well. Because based on what you're saying, it seems that the Barbados Water Authority certainly shut down their pumps to secure everything. But what other lessons would you have learned from this whole exercise to ensure we can get back up and running faster next time around?
The greatest challenge we have had, as we've had before, is being able to respond to customers in the time frame that they would like. We are still working on framing that expectation. And when I say that, for instance, what concerns me immensely is that within hours, 2-3 hours of any shutdown, outside of those areas that we know that may have challenges in terms of water supply, the volume of calls that we get for individuals immediately requesting tanker or water assistance. And that says to us that either we have not yet done a good enough job at educating and indicating to all concerned that water security is not just an issue or challenge for the Barbados Water Authority, but it is also one for every single individual in Barbados. And therefore, whether we would work at it individually or collectively, we have a prime responsibility to at least store some measure of water. We keep harping on the fact that we need to store 5 gallons per person for at least 5 days whenever we're faced with these circumstances. And it is for a reason. We cannot predict what's going to happen after any particular event. In this particular instance, we are, notwithstanding, still quite fortunate, in my opinion. And I think BW also, notwithstanding any preparations done, were also fortunate because in this instance, we were not faced with as much rain as we would have expected. And therefore, the washout of soil and facilities and burst pipes and so on was also lessened. So the one thing that we would like that really concerns us greatly is the fact that we want everyone to take heed of the cautions being given by all of the entities, whether it's utilities, whether it's DEM, regardless of where this information is coming from, to take that very, very seriously. There are other internal lessons that we've learned from the perspective of efficiency, but certainly externally, if you were to look outwards, the greatest concern we've had is the fact that we are still not seeing enough individuals or enough homes making provision for the storage of water.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Halliday. And Mr. Cummins, you have the last word. Is Barbados doing enough for its disaster preparedness? Are citizens doing enough?
I don't think we're doing enough. We've certainly improved over the years. I think the the public education is a key component in constantly reminding persons, but we must pay a lot more attention to disaster preparedness. As a matter of fact, the whole question of comprehensive disaster preparedness management is key, and this is what Kerry and her team have been trying to do over the years. You mentioned just now about the spoilage of meats, but I think what caught persons unawares, as it were, is that we had this event in July. You normally expect the greatest activity between August and October, but this shows us the vagaries of climate change, and we must ensure that we take this seriously from June 1st to November 30th, and each individual can do the necessary things to make sure that he or she is prepared.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins. The message basically is that we all have a responsibility when it comes to preparing for hurricanes, preparing for disasters in general. The government has gone about they're doing the relief efforts. People are on the ground, as Ms. Hinds has pointed out. Efforts are being made to house people who don't have insurance or their houses have fallen apart or roofs blown off. But at the end of the day, as individuals, we must take responsibility for our homes and for ourselves, and we need to listen to the authorities. This is Sanka Price, and this has been The People's Business. Good evening.
You're watching CBC TV 8 in beautiful Barbados.